Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Tuesday, September 11th, 2018. Be sure to remember the fallen ones from 9/11, 2001. Moving on to some space weather to start the show off with. Our solar wind speeds are sitting at 554.2 kilometers per second with a density of 4.2. Our sun is once again blank today. 0 sunspots. That is the day one of a current stretch of 142 total spotless days in 2018. We'll talk about that here just in a second. KP indices right now are sitting at a 4 with a 24-hour max of around 5. And taking a look at the SDO in motion, I think we are going to catch a little surprise here today. Take a look here as we may have captured the next sunspot region. And let me see if I can... Oh, okay. So if we look next to that coronal hole that is beginning to form, we can see that there is a possibility for... I'm going to move our live logo here since I can't find my cursor. Take a look right here where I've got my live logo. I'll zoom in just a little bit more, folks. Take a look at this possible sunspot that is developing here. AR 2721 disappeared early in the morning today, and now we have an eruption of activity here in the equatorial region where solar cycle 24 sunspots should be at this time. So we'll keep our eyes on this right now. But a little bit more on the solar storm too. Take a look at our TSI levels. We're sitting at a 1360.76 on September 3rd, 2018. I muted it. And I wanted to mention kudos to the watchers for covering an article about the G2 storm. And I just want to say that of all the reporting they do on the extreme weather and all of the extreme volcanoes and stuff like that they cover, not just extreme, they'll cover just about every kind of eruption or earthquake and then the extreme weather. But I'm really glad to see that this news source is now picking up on a lot of solar activity stuff. And this isn't the first time that they have talked about solar minimums or grand solar minimum. They've featured many people from our community, in the grand solar minimum community, that is. And they have also featured a couple of our videos on the website here, the John Casey interview and the interview with Valentina Zarkova. So we've seen them supporting the grand solar minimum message, and I'm just glad that there is a website that is consistent with the extreme weather and solar activity. Not a lot of news sites are willing to make that connection. So I'll leave a link in the description. It gives a really good explanation of what happened on today's G2, last night's G2 storm. They are still predicting that we could be in a minor G1 storm up until tomorrow, and right now we're in the unsettled. Our 24-hour max has been at a 5, so we were in a storm condition earlier, but have since leveled off. Tonight's show is going to focus mainly around what's going on in our oceans right now. And we start off with Florence. The National Weather Service has issued a hurricane and storm surge warnings for portions of the coast of North and South Carolina on September 11, 2018. As extremely dangerous Hurricane Florence continues to head towards the East Coast, U.S. landfall is expected between South Carolina and North Carolina Outer Banks on September 13th. Florence could linger over the southeast for several days after landfall, leading to catastrophic flash flooding and major river flooding in parts of the Carolinas, Virginia, and neighboring states. Now, I will tell you this when I show you the GFS here in a bit. This article lines up with that forecast, as well as the GFS models, and there is definitely something to show you with that. Governors of Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina have declared states of emergency ahead of the storm, and more than 1.5 million people have already evacuated coastal areas. Computer model forecasts generally project Florence to make landfall between South Carolina and North Carolina's Outer Banks as a Category 4 on Thursday, September 13th. While shifts in the track are still possible, storm's impacts will expand great distances beyond the landfall occurs, and there is potential for Florence's forward speed to slow and possibly stall, leading to more than 20 inches of rain. And I've already read reports of 30 inches or more from Weather Nation today. If Florence can make landfall at a Category 4 in North Carolina, it would be the strongest storm to come ashore that far north on record. In general, most of the hurricane damage and loss of life occurs not on the coast, but from the flooding as a result of heavy rain. In all likelihood, this will be the case with Hurricane Florence as well, according to AccuWeather president and founder Dr. Joel N. Myers. He's saying this could be devastating floods well in from the coast back in the hills in the mountains of North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. There's never been a storm like Florence. Let me repeat that. There has never been a storm like Florence. It was located farther north in the Atlantic than any other storm to ever hit the Carolinas. So what we're forecasting is unprecedented. Another headline, another day where we hear this same line over and over again. Unprecedented. We've never seen a storm like this before. And I only emphasize this and highlight this, just because that this is the consistency of what we're seeing all around the world is cyclic. In other words, this cycle is happening. In my opinion, we are witnessing these records that are being broke from over 150 years old, or people saying storms that's never been seen before, which, we've only kept record on this stuff for so long. But just another comment to the pile of all are saying this unprecedented storm. We've never seen this before. We've heard articles like this all over the world, and unfortunately, this is the last place, not that I root for it anywhere, but you don't want to hear it happening on your home country, and unfortunately, my birth state. This looks like a bad situation for North Carolina, and I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to jump around tonight. I'm not going to have any kind of particular flow because I think it's important tonight we dedicate this show strictly on the awareness of what's happening right now around the oceans. We've got the latest GFS model coming in here, and it's changed a little bit. And in my opinion, it's changed for the worse. We have the approach coming up here on Wednesday. Also, if you guys notice, look at the snowfall that's happening right now northwest, southwest Canada at this point. We'll get to that too. But here we have Florence making its approach. This is Thursday into overnight Thursday into Friday morning, and she is strong. Central pressure is going to be right around 935 millibars as it makes landfall as a Cat 4. The forecasted landfall has shifted just slightly to the south, but the size of this storm, the impacts are going to be felt now in South Carolina, and the stalling has occurred in this forecast run, but it's what it's doing once it makes landfall. Here's our stalling. This is Saturday. The storm is huge, and now it starts to go backwards to the south, and now we have more coastline that's going to be affected by this storm, and it's going to make a second landfall in South Carolina on Monday. I'll show you the first one. It kind of bounces back out to sea and comes in. Now look at this. Monday, more inland. The storm kind of breaks up and then intensifies as it goes over North Carolina. Now this is way further inland than what this original track had shown. Now, don't worry if you're in central North Carolina or Virginia. I'm not saying don't worry. If you're not near the coast, you're still safer than what you would be near the coast. I'm not saying there's not going to be flash flooding in these areas right here once the storm makes landfall. There's a lot of rain to fall right here. But it's better to deal with the flooding in inland like this versus being on the coast where we're going to have to be dealing with, I saw in the chat, someone said that we're looking at 30-foot waves right now with Florence. Not as we get into landfall, but the surge is going to be pretty big. I haven't seen the forecast yet for the storm surge. I can only imagine it's going to be well over 8 feet, possibly 10 to 12, maybe higher in some isolated areas. With the winds that we're looking at right now. But I'll move forward in the forecast. We go into Monday. Into Tuesday morning, we still have heavy rain in central North Carolina heading into Virginia. And now parts of eastern Tennessee and eastern Kentucky are going to be affected by this storm. Rain-wise, though. And wind, probably some gusts. Nothing major, nothing in the Cat 4 area, but still, they'll see some gusty winds from this. Then as the storm starts to move back up the East Coast, it's going to take a trip through Virginia, West Virginia, and unfortunately Pennsylvania and New York. In Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, you guys have already had enough of the flooding from Gordon. Now we get another shot of tropical moisture to the region. So we've already had anywhere from 1 inch to 4 inches of rain throughout most parts of Pennsylvania and New York. It appears to intensify just a little bit here on Wednesday in central Pennsylvania as it moves through to the East Coast as this cold front is pushing off Florence once and for all by Wednesday. But we're still in the Northeast is still going to be affected by this tropical moisture. And look at the intensity near Maine, Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts. This is still Wednesday into Thursday. By Thursday, this storm is gone. Now, here is where I'm getting a little concerned. I'm going to put my cursor right here, folks. Take a look at this system that's outside of the East Coast on Thursday. As Florence is moving out, we have another system that's potentially, the GFS is indicating another system that's developing. So I'm going to go ahead and move you frame by frame. It doesn't look like much at first, but quickly into Thursday, there's your new low pressure system. Now, this is not as warm of waters that it is near North Carolina, but whatever the case may be, if South Carolina and North Carolina just get hit with Florence, and then here we are Saturday with more tropical moisture coming towards South Carolina and North Carolina, and by Saturday, this storm looks like it's trying to get its act together, and it stalls out just on the coast of South Carolina, continues to strengthen by Monday of next week, and could make landfall into Georgia and Jacksonville. This is what we're kind of looking at right now, unfortunately. And a cold front will push this storm out like Florence was pushed out, but fortunately, this cold front will be moving through faster than the one that pushes Florence out. But we have two identical cold fronts that are pushing out major storm systems. So we're going to keep our eyes on this particular system as well because, we're already talking about a possibility of 30 inches of rain in North Carolina, localized areas, in Virginia possibly. And now we may be looking at Hurricane Florence's multiple landfalls, widespread tropical moisture throughout the East Coast and that region, and then another development right as Florence is making its exit, another development in the Atlantic that pops up here according to the GFS and gets stronger. And here early, this is way far out. This is next week. This is Monday, the 24th. I'm sorry, this is the week following after Florence. I apologize. So there's still plenty of time for this to not even occur. And let's hope not. Because right now the models are showing a possibility of more tropical moisture for South Carolina, North Carolina, a possible Georgia landfall. The most intense part of this storm will be around Jacksonville and southeast Georgia before it just turns back into a tropical storm and gets pushed back out to the Atlantic as this cold front comes through. So very, 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 very busy forecast here in the eastern Atlantic the western, if you look at the east coast of the United States, I should say. The GFS here, not really showing much of anything as far as development. I know the National Hurricane Center has a 20% chance of development in the Gulf. This model is not really indicating any kind of storm at that point. But it's there nonetheless. I want to talk about Isaac real fast. Tropical storm. It's once again a featured story on thewatchers.net. Here we have the current track of Isaac. And if this thing continues its straight on trend and catches to go a little north-northwest, it could end up into the Gulf of Mexico, which we talked about last night. Water temperatures are favorable, but this is a way out. It's not even going to reach Jamaica until Tuesday, the 25th, if it is going to affect Jamaica at all. But we are keeping an eye on this storm. And I guess the best way to break it down here is I'll go down here and just kind of read off the latest reports right now on each storm that's significant to us. I'll start with Florence. Right now, we have sustained winds at 135 miles per hour with gusts of around 165 miles per hour. We got a maximum central pressure of 945 millibars. There is our track. The hurricane warnings are all the way from the southern part of Virginia coast all the way down to the middle of South Carolina, where tropical force winds will be felt. And guys, the spaghetti models are all close together, and that's good. There is a lot of agreement on what this storm is going to do next. So it's possible that this GFS track is also close, which I hope not. The less coastal damage, the better. But right now it looks like it might be affecting South Carolina once again. So in a way, the GFS was kind of right, unfortunately. Here's Hurricane Helene, who so far is not going to be an issue. Right now, the current sustained winds is 100 miles per hour with gusts of over 125 miles per hour. Taking a look at the track of Helene, just simply not going to be an issue. It's going to go to the middle of the Atlantic and curve out into the UK. So heads up, you guys might get some rain. Then we've got Tropical Storm Isaac, which is not very organized. We've got maximum winds of 85 miles an hour and sustained of 70. So Tropical Storm Isaac is almost a hurricane right now, but is still steady and is right now sitting, the central pressure is at a 996 millibars. And then we take a look at Tropical Storm Olivia because that matters as well. Good news is that we are not going to see the impact of this storm like we were with Lane. The winds, in my opinion, now have went way down. We're looking at winds at 55 miles per hour, which is still intense for a storm, no doubt. A gust of around 70 miles an hour. But looking at the latest track for Olivia, it is not. It doesn't appear to be hitting the main island anywhere or anytime soon, at least the worst part of this. I'm not saying they're not going to see any rain from this or any kind of wave action, but the big island, which just had around 38 to 48 inches of rain from Lane, thankfully is dodging a bullet here, but we will keep our eye on the storm, and hopefully it just continues to get weaker as it gets closer to the islands in Hawaii. Tropical Depression Paul, well, he's not really much to talk about, so we're just going to kind of leave it at that. It's a very weak storm at this point. But here's another one I want to talk about. Super Typhoon Mangkhut. This is heading towards the Philippines, Taiwan. Take a look at our track map here. Let me zoom this in so we can take a look real good. We've already seen it go past Guam. I haven't found any reports yet about how extensive any damage was at all. I will keep looking. but this is the trajectory of this storm, and it's right now making a beeline for Hong Kong. But this storm is intense. We're talking about sustained winds of 160 miles per hour. Oh, I can't get that. That's unfortunate. This storm is massive and very well put together. So far, the highest wind measured in this storm, get this, 198 miles per hour. The central pressure, 917 millibars. So here we have technically a Cat 5 hurricane getting ready to plow into the Philippines, Taiwan, and it looks like it's aiming for Hong Kong. Huge storm. We've got a big storm in the Atlantic and a huge storm in the Pacific. Neither are to be taken lightly. In both regions of this world, we have to keep our eyes on many parts of this situation right now. But we went from having zero activity to now it's popping off everywhere you look. Some impressive stuff coming out of the Atlantic. Let's take a look at the radar in motion right now. Let me zoom this in for you guys. Even the tropics there in Central America, there is definitely something trying to get organized in the Gulf. So we probably will see some development in the next 3 to 4 days. We have Isaac trucking its way towards the Caribbean, Jamaica. Helene, strong. It's a hurricane. It's a weak hurricane, but as I said earlier, it's going to trend towards the middle of the Atlantic and head off towards western UK. But the big story right now is definitely Florence. And if anybody out there is thinking about writing this one out and you live on the coast, I really believe that this is the time where it is very, very detrimental that we follow these warnings. The evacuation, 1.5 million people have already evacuated from this storm warning that's coming right now. That's pretty significant. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and we are expecting landfall from this sometime on September 13th late into early 14th on Friday. But as I'm watching this is moisture, precipitable water. There is plenty in the atmosphere to support this storm. And you can even see the amount that's available in the Gulf. And that's another reason why forecasters are confident that they might see some kind of a minor, maybe just a tropical depression develop in the Gulf. But we also have a couple of other storms that we want to keep track of. We're going to keep an eye on Isaac as it treks towards that part of the world. The tropical depression that could hit somewhere around Texas, Houston, Louisiana. We have Florence to deal with. And then, thankfully, Helene is one of the only that will be a non-factor here. And let's take a look at the Eastern Pacific real quick. If I can get it to come up. Take a look at our Super Typhoon on the GFS here. We may have some issues here. That's probably one that's not kept up on a daily basis. I kind of just went on a whim here. I wanted to see this Super Typhoon. All right, that was a bad idea. So anyway, we've got a lot to worry about. We got a lot to deal with. Hopefully everybody is listening to the warnings that are being given right now. And another thing too, we are looking at areas of Canada that are looking at snow. So while we're being distracted, or I shouldn't say distracted, but while we're being kept busy with Florence, we've got some colder air that's trying to work its way into the lower 48. and we start to see some development of snow showers in Canada, and it's second week of September, going into the second week of September. Right now on the East Coast, we're looking at some rain showers near Raleigh, Virginia, Georgia, South Carolina, Washington, D.C. could expect showers by morning. Mississippi, Louisiana. This area has been kind of getting off and on rain moisture for the past couple of days. And we have to look at what's going on in the Gulf and also what's happening on the East Coast right now. So there are going to be some areas of concern when it comes to flooding. Here's the GFS again. I wanted to show the chances of possibly some snow in the far southern parts of Canada in the coming days. It'd probably help if I put the right overlay on here. Here we go. This ought to work. So yeah, snow in southwest Canada and moving across Canada, southern Canada, near the border here. And that's the interesting thing about Florence is we see all the snow that's behind this hurricane. So we've got air cold enough to support snow, and miles in front of it, we have a hurricane moving in front of it. So basically this system is responsible for snow as well. And that kind of lingers along. More snow chances continue through that region of Canada. And as the next cold front comes through here on the 25th of September, that storm that we're watching landfall down in Florida, that's the cold front that's going to whip that back out into the Atlantic. But look at the snow chances, folks. I mean, it's almost October, I get it, but that's getting pretty close to that U.S. border. Actually, here, this model is indicating that we will look at some snow chances in upstate New York by the 26th of September. That's a strong cold front. It's worth looking at the temperatures for this time. Again, this would probably be an overnight snow. There is that brief bubble. And look at this. There is a pocket of cool air that is being forecasted late into the end of September. That's way, way out there, folks. But I'm just pointing it out that we are looking at freezing temperatures in upstate New York, here in the Adirondacks. Possibility of snowflakes flying before the 1st of October. I don't want to, that's way too far down the line. That's almost 20 days away. But you got to kind of like wonder, it might be just a glitch, but you see it pop up a couple different times. The pockets of colder air. I'm going backwards right now just to let you guys know. Let's move this back and take a look at what GFS is thinking on temperatures. Because right now, September, it's looking good. This is like an Indian summer. We're still seeing temperatures in the 80s and the 90s throughout most of the country. And then as we get closer towards mid-month, especially in the Northwest, we start to see a big pocket of cool air starting to filter in. And right around the 20th of September is where we're going to be looking at forecasted highs in the 50s and 60s in the Northeast. Some 70s still across. This is typical weather across Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. So about normal fall-like conditions. But then it looks like we get a sharp cold front that pushes down on the 26th. And daytime highs, folks, looking to be in the 50s. And morning lows in the freezing mark, which is where we see chances for snow. So a little early to say, very early to say. But very peculiar that we are looking at temperatures cold enough by the end of September for a possible snow. And we live up in the mountains, so that's not going to be unusual, but nothing's going to stick. I mean, these are just going to be flurries at best at this point, what this is indicating. Some light snow showers that are probably going to last for a few minutes. But still impressive because, remember, we've got everybody out there talking about El Nino this year. And right now, El Nino might happen. We need to get to that 0.25 to 0.5 region on the temperature. And we're above that right now. Actually, I think we're above the 2.5. Yeah, we're at 0.26. I looked at a couple of meters. I've seen some things where 0.25 is considered the El Nino. And then there's that threshold of 0.5 where it is definitely at the end of the neutral area. So anything above 0.5 is for sure El Nino. Anything below 0.5 above baseline is considered neutral, but favorable when you're sitting at temperatures like this and they continue to rise. This is the most that we have seen as far as increase here in a while for this region of our ocean temperatures. But just interesting to see if we do get that Modaki El Nino, which is that teeter-tottering. That's where we're looking at really heavy snow in the Northeast. They're already calling for cold and snow, but they're talking about more chances for blizzards. There's going to be more drought in the Southwest. Unfortunately, fire season is going to continue in California through the winter as well. And then you're going to have your typical El Nino pattern of the wet South and some icy zones to worry about in Tennessee, Kentucky, and in upper northern Alabama, northern Georgia, and northern Mississippi. So it'll be interesting how this plays out as we watch this day to day. Our North Atlantic temperature anomaly is hovering at the 0.5 below baseline. And looking at the Eastern Tropical Atlantic SS anomaly, SSTs, look at this. Still below 0.5. We're at a 0.646 below baseline in the tropics. Now, if we look at this graph, it is going up. I mean, that's obvious. We could all see that. We're in a decline right now. Usually we go back up slowly but surely. But as we are already at September 11th, and it appears that this warm-up takes right around, looks like a couple of weeks. We'll be close to the end of our peak season by the time we get to the end of September. So there, this burst of action that we're seeing right now might be hopefully the only burst of action in our oceans, because there's hints now that we're going to be seeing cooling temperatures for the second half of September, and we had a lot of people in the mainstream media that are telling us that we're going to have a warm fall. NOAA and AccuWeather, all of them said that we were going to have above average temperatures for the month of September. In fact, where I'm located here in the Northeast, we were actually much above the average temperature here for September. And I can tell you this, that we did have a heat wave last week. We did touch the 90s again. But since last week, since Thursday, we've dropped into the 70s and have been in the low 60s to the upper 50s for highs. And today, I think we were forecasted to get 71, and I think we got to 68. So right now, we're experiencing normal fall-like temperatures. The next 7 to 10 days here in the Northeast are going to warm back up into the mid to upper 70s, maybe an 80-degree reading. But by the 20th of September, I'm also seeing in the forecast that our temperatures once again start dropping below 70s for highs. We're talking mid 60s, upper 60s for highs. So to me, we're seeing, I think, an average September, unless some of these temperatures were so high in the beginning of September that it kind of threw the averages out of or out of whack. I mean, we'll see. There's plenty of month left to go, and it'll be interesting to see how we end the month on precipitation and how we end the month in temperatures. August, I think, was probably the wettest on record in most places of the United States, if not around the world. So with these next storms coming through, with Florence and a possible disturbance in the Atlantic that hits Georgia and Florida, and the possibility of 2 storms in the Gulf, with Isaac, if it survives its trek from where it is right now, and then the pop-up development that should be happening right off of the coast of Texas near Houston. So a lot to be aware of right now, a lot to keep our eyes on. I'd like to check in now with my producer and
always. She's just great. And we got people like, well, Rob's driving, so he can't hear you yet. Jimmy is in there. Mountain Dew's in there. Thor is in there. Equa. Morning Dew.
Morning Dew or Mountain Dew?
Mountain Dew. I don't have it in front of me. It's probably Morning Dew.
It's probably Morning Dew.
Don't. Anyway, loads of new people. A lot of people sharing their stories about 9/11 and also just their concerns about this storm. It's a big one, and it is terrifying. This sends me back to covering Harvey, which was horrific to watch unfold. And this one, honestly, is a little bit more terrifying to me to watch unfold. I'm very worried about the pure concentration in the population that this storm is going to hit. And people really do need to prepare and take this seriously. And it's better to be safe than sorry. Definitely take caution to this storm. And I'll see if I can get my computer and my phone working and get back in the chat.
All right. Yeah, we can't stress enough about the warnings that we've been reporting on this story since mid last week. And really, when the governor of North Carolina announced that, and thanks to G. White, he was the first one that brought us to the story where North Carolina had declared a state of emergency. And the whole article actually has him sounding concerned about hurrying up and getting all your crops out and transporting them as fast as possible. To hear that franticness, they saw the projections. And really, back then, the GFS models were not showing what we're seeing right now. We had an idea that we were going to see some stalling action, but we didn't know the intensity of it. But for a governor to make a bold statement like that days outside of this storm, when it's still uncertain where the tracking was, there was some good, solid data that he was around, which made him pull the trigger on the decision to have farmers accelerate their harvest. Because looking at the GFS, guys, I mean, not trying to scare anybody here. I know there are people that live in areas right now where they will be affected, and our prayers and thoughts are with you, and we hope that you can get somewhere safe. There is a comment from a subscriber. What video was it? Thor Anderson, I think is his name. Thor, thank you very much for your post, the links that you left. If you have any more useful links like that to post in the comments section of this video, that would be greatly appreciated. I know it's really late in the game, but we are trying the best that we could to find resources that we're going to show where people can go. But what's scary about this is that we were telling people to get away from the coast, and this storm stalls out at the coast, so that's going to be some heavy rain. But then it makes landfall, and the intense rainfall is reaching further inland than what was originally forecasted. So my concern is people who went to central North Carolina and further west will now be involved with the flash flooding. But the good news is that if you were on the coast and dealing with that rain, that would be the double whammy there. That would be the worst case scenario. So even though you're going to be in some heavy rainfall from this storm, further inland in North Carolina and South Carolina, it's still going to be a lot better situation than it will be for someone who is living on the coast down here, and we get 30 inches of rain, especially when this storm stalls out. And this thing is very impressive, very well put together, very strong storm. Again, they're forecasting it to be a Cat 4 when it does make landfall. Looks like the central pressure of that when it does make landfall is going to be right around 934 millibars. So still pretty strong storm at that point. And even as it hovers, it stays in the mid-950s, back below 950 as it travels south to South Carolina, and then just explodes right over the northern parts coastline of South Carolina and mid-South Carolina, all the way, really the whole state. Right now, unfortunately, the shift needs to be also in South Carolina. Folks that were not prepared need to make their preparations now, because this storm does appear that it's going to take a little bit further south track and affect a lot more area. And again, to be inland on this storm is much better to be on the coast. We're not dealing with two flooding. You got the rain flood and then you got coastal flooding. At least we're just dealing with rainfall, heavy if that be, in areas in inland, but not dealing with that strong coastal flooding and rain. But the concern's going to be right here. It's initial landfall in North Carolina. The stalling out here for several days. It does not make a movement towards anywhere until about Sunday, and it gets worse in areas on the eastern side of the storm. And thankfully, right now, the GFS has the majority of that intense rainfall in the ocean, but we do see it start to get really intense and pick up once again on Sunday, and then after Monday, everything goes downhill inland, further inland, and this storm moves through the northeast and actually gives us more moisture than what we were actually expecting in that part of the country before this cold front shoves it right off of the east coast. So some very strong high pressure coming through that's going to move not one, but two storms. There's that other storm that's going to make landfall near Georgia into Jacksonville. Hopefully this is just a blip on the GFS that goes away here in the next several days, because that's still far away, guys. That's the 24th of September. So we know how reliable GFS can be and cannot be as well. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight, guys. We really Sorry, folks. As I was saying, thank you for watching once again. Please remember to like and share. We will be back tomorrow night. Well, something's going on with the audio. We do apologize here. Okay, let's try this. Tomorrow night, we'll be back with another update on Hurricane Florence as she will be making her approach for landfall. And as I was saying before something happened in the audio, hopefully there is something good that does come out of this, as far as maybe the storm is not going to be as intense, or maybe it's not going to stall out as long. But right now, things aren't looking too hot for that area, and this is the time, if you have a place to go, you need to get going right now. All right, guys, we will talk soon. Please like and share. We'll be back tomorrow night. Take care.